Welcome Richard Di Natale.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, let me start by acknowledging the Ngunnawal people, the traditional owners of the land on which we now stand, and I want to pay my respects to their elders past and present. Let me also acknowledge the custodianship and enduring relationship with their country, and to reiterate the call that we Greens made last week to the Prime Minister, asking him to increase funding for the successful Indigenous Rangers program. Now, that's a program that delivers environmental benefits, it delivers cultural benefits, it provides meaningful employment, it ensures that we get positive health outcomes. And there is a lot of rhetoric around closing the gap. Well, let's fund those things that work. And the Indigenous Rangers program works, and we should reach our target of 5,000 people, 5,000 rangers across the country. Let me also acknowledge our wonderful and talented team of elected representatives. The Greens have 11 members of the Australian Parliament. We punch above our weight in a very peaceful and non-violent way, of course. And we are really the innovators of Australian politics. I also want to acknowledge Alex Batal, our candidate for Batman, in the audience. She's going to make a terrific contribution to the Australian Parliament, not if, but when she joins Adam Bandt in the lower house of the Australian Parliament. We've also got Christina Hobbs, our ACT Senate candidate, and we're hoping that we might be able to give that contest a shake as well. When I took on the leadership of the Australian Greens almost a year ago now, I said at that first press conference, unless we tackle dangerous global warming, then everything else is background noise. And today I want to reiterate that call. Reiterate that call after some alarming scenes have played out across our national landscapes and indeed across the world. I want to repeat that call a year after the Meteorological Association didn't just report that 2015 broke records, it shattered records. I want to repeat that call when here we are in an election year where January, February, March have now set new records when it comes to increases in temperature. I want to reiterate that call, knowing that our economic prosperity, that the livelihood of future generations depends on us making the transition towards a pollution-free and jobs-rich economy. We have those unprecedented and devastating reports coming to us now from the Great Barrier Reef, where we're seeing coral bleaching on a scale never seen before, where in some of those northern reefs we risk losing permanently 90% of that incredible world that lives beneath the surface. And what an irony when David Attenborough is bringing us those incredible images into our living rooms, this magical underwater world, that at the same time that's happening, that some of our most respected scientists and their students are weeping at the devastation that is occurring to that great jewel. We as Australians are custodians of the Great Barrier Reef. It is an incredible gift that we have been given. It's the only thing that's visible from space. Imagine that, the only living thing visible from space. Nothing else like it anywhere in the world. And it's a gift to the economy as well. It contributes $6 billion a year and 69,000 jobs reliant on a healthy reef. We may be the generation that takes that gift away from our children. And it's not just the Great Barrier Reef that we risk losing. We risk losing some of the most incredible wilderness anywhere in the world. Earlier this year, I joined with Nick McKim, our Tasmanian senator, to fly over the Tarkine in Tasmania. And we were both in despair at the devastation wrought on that incredible wilderness by those Tasmanian wildfires in January this year. They changed that landscape forever. And let me again just point out, this isn't wilderness that has evolved to respond to fire. What we're talking about is wilderness that evolved, part of that great Gondwana land, that supercontinent in the southern hemisphere, where some of these plants date back to 1 million years. We've got pencil pines and cushion plants, some of them 1,500 years old, and here they are, gone forever. What we're experiencing now are political leaders in this country who are standing by while our natural heritage is being destroyed, standing by while our children are being robbed of their future prosperity, and standing by while a national emergency is unfolding. We need desperately, now more than ever, political leaders with courage and vision to chart a different course for our Great Barrier Reef, for those precious forests, and for our economy. We've had decades to get this right. I remember Bob Brown being ridiculed several decades ago when he came into the parliament talking about sea level rises of close to 1 metre. And yet there we were 2 weeks ago in the nation's parliament, a question directed at the chief lawmaker of the land, Senator Brandis, being asked to justify those 200 jobs being lost from the CSIRO, and his response? Well, it doesn't seem to me that the science is settled at all. That we could still be having this debate at this time in the nation's history is remarkable. And one of the key problems is that we have the influence of huge corporate donations from the fossil fuel industry, gifted to the Liberal Party, the National Party, and indeed the Labor Party, who as a consequence refused to admit that coal is a significant part of our global climate change challenge, and in refusing to admit that, what they're doing is signing the death warrant of the Great Barrier Reef and those incredible forests. As Bill McKibben said, you simply can't have both the Paris Climate Agreement and Adani's Coalmichael mine. You simply can't have both. In fact, if you're going to have any hope of keeping to an increase of 2 degrees, much less 1.5 degrees, you can't have new mines in Australia. He goes on to say that coal at best can continue its decline, tailing away to a minor industry over the next decades. But that's it. Anyone who looks at the numbers knows it. The same goes for offshore oil drilling, new coal seam gas fields. Keep doing this stuff and the math doesn't work. He's absolutely right. If this election is to be about one thing, it has to be about who has the courage, who has the vision to stand up to the big polluters, to take the necessary action to prevent catastrophic global warming and to transition our economy away from those industries that brought us prosperity over the last century but won't deliver us future prosperity going into this century. Yet for all of the Prime Minister's bold talk, for all of his rhetoric, he talks a lot about providing the economic leadership that was so sadly lacking under the Abbott administration. He is silent on the greatest economic challenge of this era. Instead, he wants to have an election campaign about a building commission that most people have never heard of and a scare campaign about property prices. That is the Prime Minister's bold vision for the nation. Now, he does it because he presides over a party that promised calm and methodical leadership, but what have they delivered? More turmoil, more chaos and more division. So if there's one thing that brings those conservative reactionaries together, it's the promise of a bit of good old-fashioned union bashing and a dishonest scare campaign about property prices. You see, the deeper problem for the Prime Minister is that the one thing that really unifies that team is an agenda that produces lower taxes, which means less spending for health and education. That is really what gets the Conservatives motivated, but it's deeply unpopular with the electorate. It's why Tony Abbott was so roundly punished after the 2014 budget, where he had a huge breach of faith with the electorate and took an axe to spending on healthcare, on education and on social supports. And it's anger that continues right now under this Prime Minister as we see a government presiding over tax avoidance on a grand scale and then having the temerity to tell the Australian people that we don't have enough to invest in our schools and hospitals. When you have politicians and some commentators pointing the finger at ordinary Australians and saying, you shouldn't expect these things. Yes, we're a wealthy country, but you have no right to expect these things, much less deserve them. Well, something is terribly wrong. And you know, when you see these huge political donations from large special interests dictating the terms of the public debate, whether it be on climate policy, on industrial relations policy, indeed on tax reform, you know that people are getting very, very angry. Now, this isn't something that's unique to Australia. This is something that is being experienced right around the world. We're seeing the emergence of so-called anti-establishment candidates right around the world. You're seeing the US presidential primaries. We're both on the left and right. You're seeing a groundswell of support for the two anti-establishment candidates. People are fed up with business as usual politics, and they have every right to be, because we're fed up with it too. We are fed up with business as usual politics. When I took on the leadership, I also said at that press conference that we are the home of progressive mainstream voters. We're the natural home for those voters. And I know people thought, well, what does that mean? Are the Greens going in a different direction? Are they going to drift towards the political centre? Does this mean a realignment in terms of who they are and what they stand for? No, that analysis is dead wrong. It is the old parties, it is the establishment that has deserted those progressive mainstream voters. And that's why people are looking at the Greens and independents in greater numbers than ever before. It's the old parties who take those huge corporate donations, who resist the establishment of a national anti-corruption watchdog, whose policy agenda is being set by vested interests, not being set by what the community want. I believe that we do have an obligation here to represent the interests of the community. I think that's what we're elected to do, not to represent or do the bidding of big business, simply to help those companies continue to pollute our airways, pollute our farmland and destroy the Great Barrier Reef. I do believe we've got a duty to stand up to big business and the super rich to say, you've got to pay your fair share of tax so that we can invest in the foundations of a decent society, healthcare, education and so on. And I think that, and really believe, that in an election campaign around property prices and the abolition of the Union Commission, the people deserve more. And we are going to lay out our vision for a more prosperous, a more sustainable and a more caring society. And we owe that to the Australian community after so many years of empty politics. The great tragedy of recent decades is that we have previous administrations, the Howard Costello administration, that wasted the proceeds of those rivers of gold that came from the mining boom. They delivered tax cut after tax cut, and when they couldn't deliver any more tax cut, they invented the baby bonus to get more money out the door to give to people. And the great tragedy of that was they failed to invest in infrastructure, productivity-building infrastructure, clean energy, fast and efficient public transport, those things that we know are going to be the pathway to future prosperity. But worse than that, they made income inequality a greater problem, something that we're still grappling with today. ACOS tells us that over the last 20 years, the share of income going to those at the top has risen significantly, while the share of income going to those in the middle and at the bottom has fallen away sharply. We've got a Prime Minister who enjoys taking selfies on public transport. He wants to be the Prime Minister for cities, and yet there he is, flying around the country, spruiking those polluting, congestion-invoking road projects at the expense of decent public transport. He spruiks innovation while he's cutting investment in those industries that will drive innovation, the CSIRO, research and development, He talks about the knowledge economy, but there he is presiding over a second-rate national broadband network and dismantling what was a good system. He watches on as negative gearing and capital gains tax superheat property markets against the wishes and aspirations of affordable home ownership for the young. And he's failing to manage the transition towards a clean energy economy. Let me give you an example. He recently spruiked his changes to ARENA and the Clean Energy Finance Corporation. Well, a little while ago we were approached by Solar Reserve, a US renewable energy company, who built a solar thermal plant in Nevada and want to build one in Port Augusta. It's 110 megawatts. It would replace the last polluting coal assets, would have 24-hour storage capacity. This is amazing technology. Concentrate the sun's rays, heat up some molten salt, use that to drive a turbine, clean energy, storage issue solved. And yet here was Malcolm Turnbull making changes to the Australian Renewable Energy Agency that would prevent that company from receiving the support it needs to get that project off the ground. Under the changes proposed by Malcolm Turnbull, the Carnegie Wave project would not have got off the ground. This is technology we are exporting now to the world. We talk a lot about the new economy, but at the heart of the new economy is clean energy, is rapid telecommunications, is fast and efficient public transport, is a greater investment in research and development. That's what the new economy is, and on each of those measures, the Prime Minister is failing. But it's not just the Prime Minister. Today, Labor announced their climate policy, and it is silent on the issue of coal exports. If there was ever a sign of the extent to which the Labor Party, the National Party and indeed the Liberal Party are beholden to the coal industry, it is the continuing approval of these new coal mines, coal port expansions, coal infrastructure, while at the same time espousing strong action on global warming. They won't touch the sacred cow of industry assistance to the fossil fuel interests. Remarkable that both Bill Shorten and Malcolm Turnbull have been silent on the $13.5 billion gifted to Clive Palmer and Gina Rinehart in the form of fossil fuel tax credits. All this at a time when they are telling us that we have a spending problem. Well, the good news is that the Greens have been the disruptors, the innovators in Australian politics. We announced our policies on negative gearing before anyone dared to go there. We paved the way for Labor to announce their policy. We announced our policy on superannuation tax concession, again, long before that issue was discussed in mainstream economic circles. Well, it won't be long before the issue of fossil fuel subsidies becomes a mainstream issue, and I call now on Bill Shorten and Malcolm Turnbull to show some courage and to spend that money on schools and hospitals, on infrastructure, rather than gifting it to the big polluters. We've got a great plan to tackle global warming and to help create the new economy, a new economy driven by clean energy. We've got a proven track record. We delivered in the last parliament in spades when we negotiated, in the words of the International Energy Agency, model climate legislation that delivered the Australian Renewable Energy Agency, the Clean Energy Finance Corporation and, of course, a price on pollution. Our plan directs investment away from those lazy areas into productive areas of the economy that will set us up for the future. It's fully costed, and thank goodness for the Parliamentary Budget Office, another outcome of that power-sharing government that has allowed parties that don't have access to Treasury to provide an alternative to the Australian people. And don't we desperately need it? They do a terrific job. And through their work in costing our policies, we have got a proposal to invest in education, the building block of the new economy. Lifetime learning from childcare through to higher education and beyond. To invest in people's health. To support people with a disability. To raise basic support payments so that no Australian has to live below the poverty line. We've already said when it comes to higher education that we should make the deficit levy permanent, recognise that higher education is a public good and make it more affordable for students rather than less affordable. The latest in science, in research and development, will drive innovations in healthcare, and we've got a good story to tell on that front. In agriculture, tourism, and advanced manufacturing. Look at Geelong and what it's doing with its carbon fibre technology to create those sustainable jobs over the long term. Together with this smart investment, we can bring regional communities and cities closer together by investing in a world-class national broadband network, by investing in public transport. Our plan also provides a better way for dealing with those innocent people who are coming to us seeking our protection by investing in regional cooperation rather than wasting billions of dollars and destroying the lives of innocent people in those horror-inducing prison camps offshore. Now we know, declared by the Supreme Court of Papua New Guinea as unconstitutional and illegal. Again, how ironic that we have our political leaders telling us that to seek asylum is illegal when in fact it's their actions that have been shown by the court in PNG to be illegal. We also believe in increasing our humanitarian intake to 50,000 people. Not simply to be able to offer innocent people protection, but because we know they will make a contribution to the nation. Who's to say that the next Syrian or Iraqi or Sri Lankan refugee won't be the next Governor-General of the country? Indeed, that's what's happened in South Australia. We recognise that restoring our foreign aid commitment is an investment in regional security, in reducing conflict, in helping with technology transfer when it comes to climate change. You see, the key difference with all of these things is we see health, education, foreign aid, humanitarian assistance to people seeking asylum. We see all those things as an opportunity to build the nation. They aren't a cost, they aren't a burden. That's why we are elected to the parliament. And it's these principles that will guide us when we address Scott Morrison's first budget in an election campaign year. Now, Adam Bant, our Treasury spokesperson, and Peter Wish-Wilson, our Finance spokesperson, are going to announce our budget principles later in the week. And they'll give you more details about some of this, but stay tuned. This will be the only sensible debate you hear on the economy through the election campaign. Let me summarise what some of those aspects are. Let's get money moving out of unproductive areas of the economy. Let's end those unfair tax breaks. Let's direct it into productive areas, and let's grow the clean economy. Let's lift government revenue. Let's make sure that we raise it so that we can get the world-class healthcare, education and public transport system we need. Let's transition our economy towards clean energy, recognising that it will increase GDP, but also recognising that GDP is not the only measure of whether a society is moving in the right direction. Let's start working on some of those indicators for national well-being. And let's remember that an economy needs to work for us and not the other way around. In keeping with these principles, the Greens have already launched the most ambitious tax avoidance package that the country's seen. It would bring in $1.7 billion over the forward estimates. We're proud to have already delivered on that in part, and will continue to be the voice in the parliament that ensures those people who can afford it most start to contribute to the society that has given them so much opportunity. Today I can also announce that the Greens would introduce the Buffett rule. It's a high-income tax guarantee. It puts a floor on tax deductions to stop some of the wealthiest Australians paying less tax than a teacher or a nurse or a policeman. It's called the Buffett rule because the billionaire, Warren Buffett, thought it was immoral that he should be paying less tax than his secretary. We agree. We agree. And it's not a new tax. This is just a tax this is just a guarantee on existing tax rates to say that those people, the top 1% of the Australian community, start paying their fair share. We saw this year's tax data with millionaires in Australia paying no tax at all. 56 people who earned a collective $129 million paid no tax. They did pay $47 million in advice on how to reduce their taxable income. And at the same time, we've got Australians being told you've got to tighten your belt while the government rips out $80 billion from schools and hospitals. A simple floor on the amount of tax that people should pay will generate a collective tax return of $7 billion over the forward estimates, coming from the top 1% of the Australian community who pay very little tax. With over 80% of wealth now invested, with 80% of wealth in investment in housing and shares accrued by the top 20% of households, we've also been leading the charge on negative gearing and capital gains tax reform. And again, I come back to this point. The Prime Minister's proposition is that he believes that the intergenerational inequity that has been driven by the fact that those of us who are able to afford our own home, who benefited from free education, from universal health care, should rob that opportunity for the generations that follow. That is the basic proposition that Malcolm Turnbull is putting to the Australian community. Now, a fortnight ago, 50 prominent Australians wrote an open letter calling on the government to consider how much tax should be raised and to frame its next budget around a fairness agenda. Well, we agree. Which is why we're not going to engage in a tax cut arms race at this election. I mean, it is somewhat ludicrous that we've got some consideration given to a cut to big business when the ATO tells us that 100 of Australia's richest companies are paying no tax at all. So a tax cut on zero still is zero. I have to say also that we're in a period of slow wages growth, low inflation. We've got some revenue issues, serious ones. This is precisely the wrong time to even be thinking about cutting taxes. See, at the core of our plan is that our tax system is there to provide the services that the Australian people deserve, to end those unfair tax breaks, and to tackle inequality. And we're proud of that. We have a progressive taxation system to tackle the huge and growing inequality that exists in Australian society. And that's why we've proposed a plan of a new system of progressive personal tax rates that will make the very wealthy pay more and raise $24 billion over the next decade, simply by adding those two marginal tax rates, one of which is making the budget deficit levy permanent. But our plan's not just about new revenue measures. We also acknowledge that there is some waste and inefficient spending in the system. It's why the Greens proposed redirecting that inefficient, inequitable and inflationary private health insurance rebate directly into the provision of health services. That is one of the worst pieces of government policy to be introduced in the healthcare space. Don't take my word for it. Listen to what Jenny Macklin had to say about it when it was introduced into the parliament. It's also why I said to Minister Lee when she took on her job as Health Minister, don't introduce Medicare co-payments. Let's look at those low-value, inefficient items that are listed on the Medicare schedule, and let's ensure that we review it to provide better care for patients and better value for money for the taxpayer. As I said earlier, closing offshore detention brings in $160 million and frees us up to invest in a regional solution, providing safer pathways. Not just the morally just position, but the fiscally responsible position as well. And we don't believe that spending on defence is a sacred cow. If we're talking about government spending, then why is it that we can't examine defence spending? How is it that we can spend billions of dollars on those joint strike fighters when we know that the rest of the world is asking some serious questions about them? And that's why we've initiated an inquiry into that issue. But let me return to where I started. At the heart of our plan is a blueprint for tackling dangerous global warming. It's time to make the big polluters stop, to make them start paying again, stop getting a free ride. As a close election looms, and possibly a hung parliament, I understand that some of our esteemed colleagues are speculating on that possibility, our top priority going into the next parliament will be to renew Australia's energy system and to put in place strong climate laws to protect the Great Barrier Reef, to protect those forests, to create jobs and to attract international investment. We have to get back on track. Too many years have been wasted. And I have to say, being in Paris was an eye-opener, because what we saw in Paris was the business community recognising the science, not playing base political politics, understanding that there's a buck to be made and wanting a piece of the action. This century belongs to those nations that embrace this challenge and that take action and take it quickly. We saw the Abbott government remove the carbon price, joining with the Labor Party to slash the renewable energy target. The cost of that was millions of dollars in revenue lost from Hydro Tasmania and 98 people losing their job. In Portland, in my home state of Victoria, a place with high youth unemployment, we saw Keppel Prince Engineering, one of the country's largest manufacturers of wind turbine towers, sack 100 people as a result of us going backwards on renewable energy. It doesn't have to be this way. We have a plan to renew Australia, a scheme to assist the transition of workers out of the old jobs and into the new ones. We've got targets for 90% renewable energy, and we know that we can get there and get there quickly. But the transition won't be easy, as Machiavelli said. It must be remembered that there's nothing more difficult to plan, more doubtful of success, nor more dangerous to manage than a system, for the initiator has the enmity of all those who would profit by the preservation of the old institution and merely lukewarm defenders in those who gain by the new ones. During this election campaign, I'll be visiting communities, people young and old, from all walks of life, who might not know it, but they are part of a growing movement of climate activists. They're ordinary people, people like the people I met on the Liverpool plains, who are fighting a proposal for a dirty big coal mine in the middle of their food bowl, and people of the Latrobe Valley who understand that this change is inevitable. They know that they need their governments to listen and to act, to commit to a transition plan. The PM says there's never been a more exciting time to be an Australian. I wonder whether Professor Terry Hughes agrees, a world-renowned marine biologist who wept with his students when he reported the extent of damage on the Great Barrier Reef, or whether those 69,000 Australians who rely on a healthy reef, whether they agree. In a few hours' time, I'm going to fly to Cairns. I'm going to witness that devastation on the Great Barrier Reef. I'm going to lay out a plan that will phase out our reliance on those industries of the past, because we know we have no more time to waste. Now more than ever is the time for some courage and vision in Australian politics. Thanks, everybody.